Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the ultimate question. And of course, the ultimate question about your human existence is death. And I know this sounds a little depressing, but I really think you're going to want to pay attention to this because, after all, your turn is definitely coming. I know this is going to sound a little bit morbid, but the older I get, naturally, the more I find myself thinking about the subject of death. And it's not that I'm afraid to die, because honestly, I'm not. I mean, we'll see what happens when I actually get to the finish line. I might have this little moment of panic. I have seen some people do that. But for right now, I'm pretty comfortable with the idea of my own mortality. It does raise some questions, however. And these are questions that people have wrestled with since at least the beginning of recorded history. Stuff like, where do I go when I die? What exactly happens 1 minute after I draw my final breath and close my eyes for the last time? Now, if you want to answer those kinds of questions, you really have to figure out who or what you are. Are you some kind of spiritual being who just uses a physical body like a suit made out of meat? Or are you a purely physical being who just happens to disappear the day you die? And where exactly are you right now? I mean, I know that I'm right here in a chair and I occupy a specific position in space, but where exactly is the core of who I am? What is the essence of Shawn? After centuries of scientific discovery, we've come to the conclusion that the sum total of my personality, my beliefs, my characteristics, they're all housed in this, 3-pound lump of gray matter that sits behind my forehead. And maybe because my eyes are right in front of my brain and my eyes are the primary point of access to the world, maybe that all just creates the illusion that the essence of who I am resides up here inside my skull. And I know we all kind of take that for granted, but historically, we haven't always thought of the brain as the seat of consciousness. So, where exactly do I reside? Is this where I am inside my head? Is the brain the seat of the human soul? I don't know if you've ever seen some of those really schlocky science fiction movies from the 50s or 60s, like The Brain That Wouldn't Die. I've mentioned that one before. It's where some mad scientist separates the human head from the rest of the body and keeps it alive. And the idea behind these movies is that the brain is really the essence of who you are. Your body is just a support system that keeps your brain alive and allows it to interact with the external world. But this up here is where you live, inside your head, and everything else attached to your brain is there to serve this incredible control center, which makes it possible for you to have a meaningful existence. Now again, I know this all seems obvious to us, but we haven't always located the seat of consciousness in the brain. Go back and read some of the old literature and you'll find people talking about using their hearts to experience emotion, which is something we still do today when we tell people, follow your heart or love that person with all your heart. Go back further in history and you'll actually find some ancient cultures talking about using their livers the same way. I guess we've always known somehow that something physical inside your body is responsible for who you are and how you experience this universe. Go back far enough and you'll find people guessing that the various organs in your body were actually responsible for creating certain temperaments or personality types. We still have artifacts from that kind of thinking in our language today. So for example, we identify people as sanguine or choleric or melancholic or phlegmatic. And if you look at those words carefully, study the etymology, you'll see that they're rooted in the various body fluids. It's kind of disgusting, but way back when, we believed that sanguine people were governed by their blood. That's what the word means. Choleric people were governed by yellow bile, melancholic people were governed by black bile, and the phlegmatics kind of got the short end of the stick because, it was believed they were governed by their phlegm. The idea, though, is still kind of fascinating because somehow we realize that who we are is rooted in the very physical reality of our bodies. You just can't escape physical existence. and somehow that physical existence defines who you are. Now, that of course kind of runs foul of the way that most people think about the essential nature of human beings. In a lot of cultures, people tend to think in what we call dualistic terms. You have your physical self, but then you also have a spiritual self, a consciousness that can somehow exist without a body. And it can also somehow think without a brain. Now, from where I sit, that raises some really important questions. If I need a brain to think and then I suddenly die and leave my body, how does that work? How do I go on with the business of thinking if I don't have a neural network? Is it like a relay race where my physical brain suddenly hands the baton of consciousness to my ghost when it's leaving? Or does my spirit kind of play my physical brain and my neural network like a puppeteer pulling the strings on a marionette, making my existence seem conscious and real, but then it just dumps this whole meat puppet on the ground when the show is over? Where exactly is the seat of the soul? Now, I know that most of us slept through history class in high school, but here comes payday for those of you who didn't. There are lots of points in history we could visit to examine the nature of humanity, but since we only have a few minutes together, let's go back to the big one. Let's go back to the Greek philosopher Plato. Now, I don't know if you remember studying Plato's theory of forms or the allegory of the cave, but this is probably the #1 influence on the way that you and I think about death and dying. And I hate to say it, but Plato might actually be a bigger influence on us than the Bible. Plato taught that the material world is imperfect, and in a lot of ways, well, I'd have to agree. Everything you encounter in this life is always going to have some kind of flaw, some little thing that makes it, well, less than perfect. But Plato might argue that the reason we know something is imperfect is because we have some idea of what perfection should look like. That model of perfection in our mind is something he called the ideal, something that doesn't actually exist here in the physical world. It belongs to the spiritual world out there somewhere. And you and I live among shadowy representations of those perfect ideals that only exist in the non-physical spirit world. So, Plato's analogy of the cave kind of goes like this. Imagine that you and I live in a deep, dark cave and we're stuck there. We're chained to a wall and we spend our entire lives staring at the back wall of the cave. Behind us, there's a source of light, a fire that casts shadows on the wall in front of us, so that when something moves past that source of light, we can kind of see it, except all we really see is a blurry, imperfect shadow. So Plato said that the blurry shadow is this material, physical world. Everything we experience in this place might seem physical and real, but it's an illusion. It's just a fuzzy, indistinct representation of a much higher reality. Now, that higher reality only exists in the non-physical spiritual realm, he said, which is somewhere out there, outside of the cave. So understandably, what a lot of Greek philosophers wanted to do more than anything else was leave this physical world with all of its problems and ascend to the spiritual realm where they could finally be free. That's why, in Plato's account of the death of Socrates, you have this great teacher trying to comfort his students with the idea that his impending execution by poison is actually a good thing. It's a promotion. He's going to escape the physical world. Let me read you just a little bit from Phaedo, which is Plato's account of the death of Socrates, and this is Socrates speaking. I want to make my argument before you, my judges, as to why I think that a man who has truly spent his life in philosophy is probably right to be of good cheer in the face of death, and to be very hopeful that after death he will attain to the greatest blessings yonder. In other words, he's saying that real philosophers spend their lives contemplating a higher reality. And when they die, they get to leave this imperfect physical existence and live the way they want to live in the world of spirits, the world of perfect ideals. That's why things like sexual relationships or food and drink didn't matter to some of these philosophers, because those kinds of physical activities are part of this messy, imperfect physical world. What the philosopher wanted was knowledge, which he believed is far more possible once you leave this physical existence. So here's what Socrates teaches his students. It has really been shown to us that if we are to ever have pure knowledge, we must escape from the body and observe matters in themselves with the soul by itself. It seems likely that we shall, only then, when we are dead, attain that which we desire and of which we claim to be lovers, as our own argument shows, not while we live, for if it is impossible to attain any pure knowledge with the body, then one of two things is true. Either we can never attain knowledge, or we can do so after death. In other words, what a philosopher wants to do is step out of the deep dark cave and out into the glorious light of day. So the question, of course, is how does that mesh with what this book says? Don't you go away. I'll be right back.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
As far as we know, Socrates never actually wrote anything down, but we have people like Plato to thank for what little we do know about his teachings. And what you have in this account of his final moments is the story of a wise philosopher who's kind of excited by the thought of death, because he's going to leave the imperfect material world and ascend to the world of spirits, where your mind is no longer impeded by the inconvenience of being locked in a physical body. Now that does raise the question of whether or not your thoughts are actually located here in your brain. I mean, if you can leave your body and still have conscious thoughts, then why in the world do you need these 3 pounds of gray matter to help you think? And if thinking actually takes place somewhere other than right here in your material brain, if the real you is actually located somewhere else, like in a ghost, then why does it warp your thinking to ingest physical substances like alcohol or LSD? How does a chemical substance, a molecule that very definitely exists in the physical world, how does that affect your non-physical mind? It's a good question. So let's do a little bit of digging. By the time the Greeks established the city of Alexandria in North Africa, Greek philosophy was all the rage. There were a lot of Jewish intellectuals living there who were eager to impress the Greeks with their own capacity for logic and reason. And in later years, this was also true of some Christians. They wanted to prove that biblical thinking was just as logical and just as profound as Socrates or Plato or Aristotle. So what we got was this blending of worlds. We had incredibly bright thinkers blending the world of Greek dualism with the worldview that is actually taught in the Bible. This became so prevalent at one point that the church father Tertullian tried to slow things down by saying, what has Jerusalem to do with Athens? The church with the academy, the Christian with the heretic. What he was driving at was this. There is enough difference between Greek philosophy and the teachings of the Bible that you want to be very careful how you mix them. Tertullian himself was a former pagan converted to Christianity, and he saw a dramatic difference between this book and the writings of the ancient philosophers, enough so that he drew a definite line in the sand. You've got the worldview of Athens on the one hand, and the worldview of Jerusalem on the other, and you've got to choose between the two because they really can't be reconciled. However, that doesn't mean that we didn't try. And you find pagan Greek dualism making huge inroads into the Christian church in ways that kind of change the way that a lot of Christians still think to this day. And one of the most blatant examples we have of this unfortunate blending of Jerusalem and Athens is found in a group known as the Gnostics, one of the earliest heresies to invade Christianity. Gnosticism comes from a word that simply means knowledge. And a lot of these Gnostics actually taught that the material world, the physical world you live in, is evil. It was created by some kind of lesser deity who frankly blew it. He made a mistake because the world is just so imperfect. They called this lesser god the demiurge, and they said that he was nothing but an imperfect emanation from a higher, more perfect God who existed in the purely spiritual realm. Now, that kind of thinking was one of the biggest problems faced by the early Christian church. And we think that one of the motives that Paul had for writing the book of Colossians was to fight this corruption of biblical thought. The Gnostics said the Creator was imperfect, that He messed things up. So here's what Paul writes about Jesus. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by Him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things consist. So you'll notice that Paul is arguing that the invisible God is the same as the Creator God. The Son is made in the image of the Father, and He is not some kind of lesser deity. And it was Jesus who made the visible and invisible worlds. So, of course, that raises another question. In the original design of the Creator, which world did human beings belong to? The visible or the invisible world? Let me show you something really important over in the book of Genesis. This comes from Genesis chapter 1, where God has created the human race. Here's what it says. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Then God saw everything that He had made, and indeed it was very good. This book says that God made us as very physical beings, and He put us in a very physical world, and when He was finished creating us, He said it was all very good. The way the Gnostics told the story, you and I were sparks that emanated from a divine fire. We were spirit beings who unfortunately got trapped in a miserable physical existence, and we won't finally realize what it means to live an authentic life until we are released from our physical bodies and we return to that divine fire out there in the universe. So you got to wonder where they got that, because it's not found in the Bible. Here we have a God who makes a real material world, and He doesn't step back and say, "Oh man, I really blew it." He looks at what He made and He says, "This is very good." According to this book, you and I were made for physical existence. And this same book tells us that God's future ideal for us, the afterlife, it's also going to be real and physical. Let me show you what I mean from Isaiah chapter 35, where it talks about the future. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then the lame man shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing, for water shall burst forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. What the Bible teaches is that God is going to return us to our original existence in the garden. And this is something you find everywhere. I mean, listen to this one. This comes from Revelation 22. And He showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life. That was something that was there in Eden. The tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And there's this one. This comes from Isaiah 65. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. So what kind of new earth would that be? Well, here's what it says just a few verses later. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For as the days of a tree, so shall be the days of my people, and my elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. Now you do not want to miss where we're going to go next. I'll be right back after this break.
Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we're committed to creating top-quality programming for the whole family, like our audio adventure series, Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy the faith-building stories from this small mountain summer camp and town. With 24 seasonal episodes every year and fresh content every week, there's always a new adventure just on the horizon.
The Bible simply doesn't describe an afterlife that is non-material out there in the misty universe somewhere. It's a concept that you find in Greek philosophy, but you don't actually find it in this book. I mean, go ahead and see if you can find it. The Bible describes a real material existence. And the reason we have imperfection is not because the Creator blew it, it's because we did. You and I are the ones who introduced pain and suffering when we decided to separate ourselves from the Creator. The reason this world seems like it's a dim shadow of something higher and better is because it is. But that something higher and better was as real and physical as it gets. So let's ask the question again. Does the real you, the one that God originally intended, does that exist way out there in an ethereal world without physical form? Are you really just a ghost? Now, there's no way we can explore this question like we should, not with the time that we have. But I'm hoping that you're going to start thinking about this and that you'll take time to explore what this book actually says to see where it takes you. Because if there's one place I want to know for sure, if there's one place I don't want to rely on mythology and superstition, if there's one thing I just need certainty on, it's this. I want to know who or what I am and where I might be going. I think if you look at this book, you might be surprised by what you find. Let me show you just a few more interesting passages to help you get started on that exploration. For hundreds of years now, Christians have insisted that my real existence, the real me, is non-physical. So we think about death the same way Socrates did, like a final release from a horrible physical existence. But I want you to notice how Job describes it. He says, "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth, and after my skin is destroyed," in other words, he dies, "this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God." So you tell me, how do you reconcile that with the teachings of the Greeks? Maybe Tertullian was right. Maybe there is no harmony between Athens and Jerusalem. Maybe our reason, our logic has actually taken us in the wrong direction, pointing us to something that just isn't so. I mean, think about it like this. In the beginning, God made a very physical world, populated by very physical, real people. And he said, that is very good. That's what he wanted to make. And in the original plan, you and I were never supposed to die. That was never going to happen. And now what God has planned for the future is a complete restoration of the physical world that used to be, a new heavens and a new earth. So we're going back to that original, perfect, physical existence. So if we were physical to start with, and we will be restored to that same physical perfection, what would be the purpose of locating the real you anywhere except in the real physical you? What would be the purpose of a ghost that leaves during a death that was never supposed to happen? You know, right now, scientists have figured out that if you freeze a human brain, or even just a part of it, you can thaw it out and bring it back. As I mentioned on another show, a few rich people have already put their brains on ice, hoping for the day when they can be revived and cured of whatever killed them. So let's say that it takes 100 years. Your brain is frozen for a century. During that time, where are you? And when they thaw you out, and we know they can do this because they've already done it with animals, when they thaw you out, do you suddenly come back from a non-physical afterlife and resume your physical existence? It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't harmonize with the way the Bible presents it. I mean, just read Genesis chapter 2. It says, "The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." This is how you're supposed to be, real and physical. Except that you're going to get a bit of an upgrade when God finally puts you back to where you're supposed to be. The pain and suffering will disappear for good. I'll be right back after this.
Dragons, beasts, cryptic statues. Bible prophecy can be incredibly vivid and confusing. If you've ever read Daniel or Revelation and come away scratching your head, you're not alone. Our free Focus on Prophecy guides are designed to help you unlock the mysteries of the Bible and deepen your understanding of God's plan for you and our world. Study online or request them by mail and start bringing prophecy into focus today.
You know, over the years, a lot of Christians have wondered about all of this. How does it work? You know, who am I? Is this the seat of my consciousness? Do I leave my body when I die? What happens after you draw your last breath? And, well, as they begin to explore the subject, they're in for a few surprises. The Bible has a few surprises, and then they go back to history and start looking at what people have said about this, from Martin Luther down to the great Lutheran theologian of the 20th century, Oscar Cullmann. And as people look, more and more are discovering that the Bible gives a lot more detail about this stuff than you think it does. This book has incredible detail about who you really are, where you came from, and what actually happens when you draw your last breath and die. And I know I've opened a huge can of worms here because, well, we didn't have a lot of time, and so I've kind of left you with just the beginnings of a study. And it's a little disconcerting to think, well, maybe I've been wrong about something so essential. And I guarantee, after what we just did, you've got a lot of questions about this. I know I still have lingering questions. The more I read this book, though, the more I discover that the detail is all there. So here's what I've done for you, because we're out of time for another week. I've put together a little book that talks somewhat about the Greek influence on Christian thought, how it made its way into Christianity. And this little book takes you through the entire Bible, and it asks some really important questions. It's called Draining the Sticks, Taking the Mystery Out of Death and Hell. Now, it probably won't answer all of your questions. I mean, it's a big subject, and people have wrestled with it for thousands of years, but this will take you through all of the major Bible passages that describe this. So, for example, what does God intend for your future? After you die, what happens next? Are we really going to be strumming harps on clouds? Is that anywhere in the Bible? Do we become angels when we die? Are we going to just float around in the ether and become part of the great cosmic consciousness? Or is the afterlife a real, tangible, physical existence with Christ, who, if you read the Bible carefully, you'll discover also rose from the dead with a real physical body? Just navigate over to our website. You're going to find this book there for really cheap. I'm practically giving the whole thing away because I'd like you to have it. It's called Draining the Sticks. Go to store.vop, Victor Oscar Peter, store.vop.com to get Draining the Sticks. Now I am out of time, so you start your explanation, and I'll meet you right back here at the same time next week. Thanks for joining me. I'm Shawn Boonstra. This has been Authentic.